It was a quiet spring morning when 55-year-old Elaine Turner zipped up her travel bag and placed it carefully by the front door of her modest apartment. Her face carried the kind of nervous excitement usually reserved for first dates, even though she had been speaking to her boyfriend for nearly 2 years. Elaine believed she was heading toward a new chapter in her life, a fresh beginning after decades of loneliness, heartbreak, and personal struggles. To her, this surprise visit would be the ultimate proof of love, the gesture that would show her boyfriend how committed she truly was. But as her bus pulled out of the terminal and the city skyline blurred into the distance, Elaine had no idea that she was moving closer not to romance but to a nightmare. Because her boyfriend wasn't the man she thought he was, and by the time she arrived at his doorstep, her fate had already been sealed. This is the story of a woman's trust, a man's lies, and the devastating consequences of secrets too heavy to bear. Elaine Turner was born in 1968 in a small Midwestern town. From childhood, she had been known as kind, resilient, and fiercely independent. But like many, her adult life carried scars, broken relationships, a failed marriage, and years of trying to rebuild herself while also raising 2 children alone. By the time she turned 50, both of her children were grown and living lives of their own. Elaine had a job she didn't particularly love, working as a bookkeeper for a local hardware chain, but it paid the bills and gave her structure. What she longed for, more than anything, was companionship. That longing led her into the world of online dating. In late 2021, Elaine stumbled upon a man named David Wallace on a dating site. He was charming, witty, and seemed to understand her in a way that felt refreshing. David was 57, claimed to be a regional sales manager, and lived in a neighboring state. From the very first conversation, he seemed attentive. He called her Sunshine, sent her good morning texts, and never failed to ask about her day. For Elaine, who had spent years feeling invisible, David's attention was intoxicating. The relationship moved quickly. Within weeks, they were talking daily. Within months, David was hinting at a future together. Elaine told her friends that she had finally met the one. But what Elaine didn't know was that David was married. He had been for nearly 30 years. His wife, Lisa, and 2 teenage children had no idea that he was living a double life. David had mastered the art of compartmentalization. When he was at home, he was the dutiful husband and father. When he was away for work trips, he was free to carry on his affair with Elaine. He created excuses with ease: business travel, late-night meetings, even fake Zoom calls to justify why he couldn't always pick up the phone. Elaine accepted these explanations because she wanted to believe him. But over time, she began to sense distance. Promises of visits were delayed. Talk of introducing her to his family never materialized. Still, she never considered the possibility that he was already married. In March of 2023, after nearly 2 years of long-distance romance, Elaine grew restless. She confided in her sister that she was tired of waiting for David to take the next step. She wanted to move forward. One night, while scrolling through bus schedules, she made a bold decision: she would surprise him. Her plan was simple: show up at his home, knock on his door, and see the look on his face. To her, it was a romantic gesture. To David, it would be catastrophic. Elaine kept the plan mostly secret, telling only her best friend, who jokingly warned, "What if he's hiding something?" Elaine laughed it off. On the morning of March 16th, Elaine packed her bag, grabbed her purse, and set off on what she thought was the journey toward a new life. While Elaine was riding that bus across state lines, David was at home having breakfast with his wife. His phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "On my way to see you. Can't wait to surprise you, sunshine." The blood drained from his face. For a moment, David froze, staring at the message. His carefully crafted web of lies was about to unravel. If Elaine showed up at his house, his wife would find out. His kids would know. His entire reputation, built on respectability and stability, would collapse overnight. Panic set in. The hours ticked by. Elaine's excitement grew with every passing mile. She rehearsed in her head what she would say when he opened the door. Maybe she'd tease him for not expecting her. Maybe they'd laugh and embrace. Meanwhile, David paced his living room, heart racing. His wife thought he was anxious about a work problem, but the truth was, he was scrambling for a solution. When the knock finally came at his door that afternoon, it wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the beginning of a crime. At around 3:45 p.m., Elaine finally arrived in Cedar Falls, the quiet suburban neighborhood where David lived. She had scribbled his address on a notepad weeks earlier, after he had casually mentioned it during one of their late-night calls. Dragging her small rolling suitcase down the neatly paved street, Elaine could almost hear her own heartbeat. She pictured his face lighting up with surprise, his arms wrapping around her, and the rest of the evening spent laughing, dining, and planning their future. To her, this was the beginning of forever. To David, watching her from behind the curtains as she approached the door, it was the end of his carefully constructed double life. Elaine rang the bell, smiling nervously, shifting her weight from one foot to another. Inside, David's wife Lisa called from the kitchen, "Honey, someone's at the door." David's palms began to sweat. In that instant, he realized he had seconds to act. He rushed forward, nearly tripping over himself, and cracked the door open just enough to slip outside before his wife could appear. Elaine's eyes lit up when she saw him. "David," she exclaimed, reaching to hug him. But instead of returning her affection, David's expression was stone cold. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Elaine, confused, laughed it off. "I wanted to surprise you. I missed you so much. Aren't you happy to see me?" David's jaw clenched. He looked at her suitcase, then at her expectant face. His world was collapsing, and the weight of exposure pressed down on him. The two moved quickly away from the porch, David insisting they, quote, "talk somewhere private." He led her around the side of the house toward the garage. Elaine was unsettled. The warmth she had expected wasn't there. Instead, his eyes darted nervously, his voice low and urgent. "You can't be here," he snapped. "Why not?" Elaine demanded. "We've been together for almost 2 years, David. I thought this was serious. Why are you acting like this?" Her voice rose, and in that moment, Lisa stepped toward the window, peeking outside. David panicked. If his wife came out, everything would be revealed. "Elaine, you need to leave. Now," he whispered harshly. Tears welled in her eyes. "Leave? After everything? After all the promises?" Her words cut through the air like shards of glass. And in David's mind, every syllable was a ticking time bomb, threatening to detonate his marriage, his family, his reputation. Later, investigators would piece together what happened in those crucial minutes. Some believed that David intended only to scare her away. Others thought he had premeditated what came next the moment he saw her at his doorstep. But what is known is this: David made a choice. As Elaine raised her voice, as neighbors' dogs barked, and as the sound of Lisa moving inside grew closer, David lunged. He grabbed Elaine by the wrist, dragging her toward the garage. She struggled, shouting his name, confused and terrified. Inside the garage, the confrontation turned violent. Elaine's suitcase fell to the ground, spilling clothes onto the concrete. David, consumed by fear and desperation, silenced her. By the time the struggle ended, Elaine lay motionless. The garage was eerily quiet, except for David's heavy breathing. He stood over Elaine's body, trembling, his hands shaking. The reality of what he had done began to sink in. But instead of calling for help, instead of admitting the truth, David's mind turned immediately to self-preservation. He had to hide her. He dragged her body behind stacks of old boxes, covering her with a tarp. He shoved her suitcase into the trunk of his car. He wiped down surfaces with rags, scrubbing away fingerprints and smears of blood. When Lisa finally asked why he had been outside so long, David calmly said he was fixing something in the garage. His double life had now spiraled into something darker. No longer just lies and infidelity, but murder. That night, David barely slept. Every creak of the house made him flinch. Every glance from his wife felt like suspicion. By morning, he had crafted a plan. He would dispose of Elaine's body far from his home, in a wooded area near one of his supposed work territories. He rehearsed his excuses. If anyone asked, Elaine never came. But what David didn't anticipate was that Elaine's absence would be noticed almost immediately. Because Elaine had told her best friend where she was going. And by the following afternoon, the missing persons report had already been filed. When Elaine's best friend, Marjorie Clark, didn't hear back from her after that cheerful, "on my way to see him" text, she grew uneasy. Hours passed. Calls went straight to voicemail. At first, Marjorie convinced herself that Elaine was simply caught up in romance, too distracted to check in. But by the next day, worry hardened into fear. Marjorie dialed Elaine's sister. Together, they pieced together what little information they had: her bus ticket, the time she left, the fact that she had been headed toward David. By March 18th, Elaine Turner was officially reported missing. Police in Cedar Falls began their standard procedure, gathering details about her last known movements. When officers contacted the bus station, they confirmed she had indeed purchased a ticket and completed her trip. Surveillance footage showed her exiting the terminal, suitcase in hand, her face glowing with excitement. That was the last official sighting of her alive. Elaine's family was devastated. They described her as dependable, responsible, the kind of woman who would never vanish without explanation. Her daughter Stephanie tearfully told reporters, "My mom was excited about this man. She thought she finally found happiness. She wouldn't just disappear. Someone knows what happened to her." Friends echoed the same sentiment. Elaine had been optimistic, open about her hopes, and had even hinted that she believed David might propose soon. The focus of the search narrowed quickly. Who was this man she had gone to see? Detectives knocked on David Wallace's door just 2 days after Elaine's disappearance. Lisa, his wife, answered. Pleasant and unsuspecting, she welcomed the officers in. David appeared moments later, feigning confusion when they mentioned Elaine's name. "Elaine? I don't know who that is," he claimed, his voice steady. Detectives exchanged glances. They had seen this before. Calm denial, the classic tactic of someone trying to distance themselves. But they pressed. They mentioned phone records, text messages, and online dating history. David hesitated, then sighed. "Oh, Elaine. Yes, I chatted with her online a while back. But that ended. Haven't spoken to her in months." It was his first mistake. Because detectives already had phone logs showing dozens of calls and texts exchanged between him and Elaine in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. As the investigation intensified, digital forensics began to pull apart David's story. Cell tower records showed that his phone had been active near the bus station at the exact time Elaine arrived. Messages on Elaine's phone revealed his pet names for her, proof of their ongoing romance. Receipts from stores proved he had purchased cleaning supplies the very night Elaine vanished. Meanwhile, neighbors came forward with troubling statements. One recalled seeing a woman with a suitcase walking up to David's house on the afternoon she disappeared. Another admitted hearing what sounded like a heated argument coming from his garage that same day. Piece by piece, the walls of David's denial began to crumble. By the end of March, police officially named David Wallace a person of interest. His photo was plastered across local news stations, his name tied to the headline, "Missing woman believed to have been visiting boyfriend, investigation ongoing." Lisa was blindsided. She confronted her husband late at night, demanding answers. David continued to lie, insisting Elaine was just a lonely woman who imagined a relationship with him. But the evidence told another story. Detectives secured a search warrant. On April 2nd, police swarmed David's home. Inside the garage, officers noticed areas that had been hastily scrubbed down. Forensic luminol revealed faint traces of blood, too faint to see with the naked eye, but undeniable under chemical light. Tucked in a corner, partially hidden behind old boxes, investigators found a small earring. Elaine's daughter later confirmed it belonged to her mother. The suitcase, however, was missing. The discovery turned the case from a missing persons investigation into a probable homicide. David was brought in for questioning. The interrogation room was cold, its walls bare, the fluorescent light buzzing above. David sat hunched, arms crossed tightly, as detectives laid out the evidence. The phone logs, the neighbor's statement, the blood traces, the earring. At first, he denied everything. Then he shifted to minimizing. "She came by, yes. But she left. I told her we couldn't see each other anymore. That's all." But detectives pushed harder. They showed him the time-stamped texts from Elaine saying she was at his door. They reminded him that no one had seen her since. Hours dragged on. David's facade began to crack. His voice faltered. His hands shook. And then, in a moment of exhaustion, he muttered, "She wouldn't leave. She was going to ruin everything." It was the first admission of guilt. What followed was chilling. David confessed that when Elaine showed up, he panicked. He admitted dragging her into the garage to keep his wife from seeing. He claimed the struggle was an accident, insisting he didn't mean for it to go that far. But investigators knew better. The meticulous cleanup, the disposal of her belongings, the lies. These were not the acts of a man who made a mistake. These were the actions of someone desperate to protect himself, no matter the cost. Still, one question remained. Where was Elaine's body? David refused to answer. Despite David's partial confession, Elaine's family was left in anguish, because without a body, there was no closure. Detectives organized search teams, combing through wooded areas and abandoned lots across Cedar Falls. Volunteers joined, holding up photos of Elaine's smiling face, determined to bring her home. Specialized K-9 units were brought in. Helicopters scanned from above. Crews waded through creeks and marshes. Days stretched into weeks, and still, nothing. Each time searchers returned empty-handed, Stephanie, Elaine's daughter, broke down. "It's like she vanished into thin air," she whispered during a press conference. But detectives weren't ready to give up. They turned their focus back to David. Investigators believed David had disposed of Elaine's body somewhere he felt familiar, somewhere he could access without drawing suspicion. They studied his GPS records, bank statements, and work schedules. Several odd trips stood out. Late-night drives into rural areas, charges at remote gas stations, hours unaccounted for. When confronted, David grew defensive. "You think I'd throw my whole life away for this? It was a mistake. She wouldn't leave me alone." But his anger only convinced detectives of his guilt. Behind closed doors, Lisa, the woman who had unknowingly shared her life with him, finally began to crack. At first, Lisa had defended her husband. She told reporters she didn't believe a word of it. But as more evidence emerged, the cleaning supplies, the garage traces, the late-night trips, her certainty wavered. Then came the final blow. Detectives revealed to her that David had been living a double life for years, carrying on affairs under the guise of work travel. Shaken, Lisa agreed to cooperate. She told police about the night Elaine vanished, how David had been unusually restless, how he left the house in the early hours of the morning, and how he had returned before dawn, smelling faintly of bleach and earth. Her testimony gave investigators the break they needed. Armed with Lisa's statement and GPS data, detectives narrowed their search to a heavily wooded park about 40 miles from Cedar Falls. On May 12th, after nearly 2 months of searching, a K-9 unit alerted near a shallow ditch at the edge of the forest. There, partially covered with branches and soil, were human remains. Beside them lay a torn piece of fabric, later matched to Elaine's travel blouse. Dental records confirmed the worst. It was Elaine Turner. The discovery shattered her family, but it also gave them the closure they had been begging for. With Elaine's body recovered, prosecutors moved quickly. David Wallace was formally charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse. At his arraignment, David appeared pale and gaunt, his once confident demeanor replaced by the vacant stare of a man cornered by his own lies. Elaine's family filled the courtroom, holding photos of her, demanding justice. The community was equally enraged. Many who knew David as a respectable family man were horrified by the double life he had lived and the brutality he had shown in protecting it. As the trial approached, prosecutors built a meticulous case. Forensic experts testified about the blood traces in the garage and the cleaning supplies purchased that night. Digital analysts presented a timeline of David's movements, showing how he drove to the wooded area hours after Elaine's disappearance. Witnesses recounted seeing Elaine approach his house, hearing the argument, and never seeing her leave. Lisa's testimony painted a damning portrait of his lies and late-night disappearance. David's defense team argued that the killing wasn't premeditated, but a crime of passion, a tragic accident fueled by panic. But prosecutors countered, if it was an accident, why didn't he call for help? Why lie? Why hide her body? The evidence spoke louder than his excuses. During the pre-trial hearings, Elaine's daughter Stephanie gave an emotional statement. "My mother went to see the man she loved. She trusted him. She thought she was starting a new chapter of her life. Instead, he took everything from her. We will never forgive him." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Elaine's sister Marjorie echoed the sentiment. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, a sister, a friend. She deserved love, not betrayal. She deserved life. For the family, the trial wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming Elaine's dignity, ensuring her story was told, not as a footnote in David's lies, but as the life of a woman who loved deeply and trusted too much. On a cool September morning, the trial of David Wallace began. The courthouse was packed. Family, friends, reporters, and curious townsfolk who wanted to see the man whose lies had spiraled into murder. The prosecution wasted no time painting David as a manipulator. In their opening statement, they declared, "This was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated act by a man desperate to protect his double life." When faced with exposure, he chose murder over honesty. The defense countered, claiming David never intended to kill Elaine, but panicked in the heat of the moment. They urged the jury to consider manslaughter, not murder. But for Elaine's family, there was no gray area. He had taken her life. He had hidden her body. He had lied every step of the way. The trial stretched over weeks, filled with gut-wrenching testimony. Forensic scientists detailed the traces of blood in the garage, explaining how David had attempted to scrub them away. Digital experts mapped out his GPS trail the night Elaine vanished, showing the route to the wooded park where her body was found. Neighbors testified about seeing Elaine approach the Wallace home, hearing shouting, and never seeing her leave. Lisa Wallace, trembling on the stand, described the moment she learned the truth about her husband's double life. Her voice broke as she admitted, "The man I thought I knew was a stranger. He betrayed all of us." Each piece of testimony chipped away at the defense's claim of panic. Prosecutors emphasized David's deliberate actions. He didn't call for help. He didn't confess immediately. He hid Elaine's body in a shallow grave and disposed of her belongings. "These are not the choices of a man in shock," the prosecutor argued. "These are the choices of a man covering his tracks." They also highlighted his years of deception, his fake business trips, his lies to both Elaine and Lisa, his ability to maintain two lives without remorse. "He lied to protect himself," they told the jury. "And when lies weren't enough, he killed to protect himself." David's attorneys tried to humanize him. They painted him as a man under stress, balancing work, family, and a forbidden romance. They claimed Elaine's arrival pushed him over the edge, that the confrontation spiraled, and that the killing was unplanned. David himself took the stand. His voice cracked as he told the jury, "I never meant to hurt her. I didn't know what to do. She wouldn't stop yelling. I lost control. I wish I could take it back." But his tears rang hollow to many. Elaine's daughter glared from the gallery, clutching her mother's photo. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. For nearly 2 days, they pored over evidence, weighing lies against facts. On the afternoon of October 11th, the courtroom fell silent as the foreman rose to read the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we, the jury, find the defendant, David Wallace, guilty. Gasps echoed through the room. Elaine's family wept, holding each other tightly. David sat motionless, his face drained of color, as the reality of a life behind bars closed in on him. Weeks later, David returned to court for sentencing. Elaine's family gave their victim impact statements, each one a heartbreaking reminder of what had been stolen. Her daughter Stephanie addressed David directly. "You took my mother's life because of your lies. She trusted you. She loved you. And you discarded her like she was nothing. But she was everything to us." The judge, unmoved by David's pleas for leniency, delivered the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but healing was far away. For Elaine's family, birthdays and holidays would forever carry a shadow. Stephanie admitted in interviews that she still sometimes expected to see her mother walk through the door. Marjorie, her sister, took up advocacy work, speaking publicly about the dangers of online relationships and the importance of recognizing red flags. Their hope was that by telling Elaine's story, others might be spared the same fate. The case left the Cedar Falls community shaken. David Wallace, once seen as a respectable man, was revealed to be a liar, a manipulator, and ultimately a killer. Neighbors admitted they struggled to reconcile the friendly family man they had known with the monster revealed in court. For many, it was a reminder that evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces. Elaine's story is one of love, betrayal, and the fatal cost of secrets. She believed in a man who promised her a future. She trusted his words, his affection, his carefully constructed lies. And for that trust, she paid with her life. Her case is a tragic reminder. Deception thrives in silence. And sometimes, the people we think we know best are hiding the darkest truths of all. In the end, justice ensured that David Wallace would never walk free again. But no sentence, no verdict, could ever bring Elaine back. Her story lives on, not as a cautionary tale about trust alone, but as a testament to a woman who deserved love, and instead met betrayal. Elaine Turner was 55 years old. She was a mother, a sister, a friend, and she deserved so much more than the lies that ended her life.